Most of you aren't subscribed. Make sure to subscribe, as it helps out the channel. Without further ado, following a long black-haired girl, we see her wake up and prepare for school, heading out as to not be late for school. Having flashbacks of being swarmed by paparazzi, she's greeted by her butler, who drives the girl to school, but at the same time a mysterious car follows them. Stepping onto school grounds, the girl puts on a fake persona, smiling, replying and greeting every student, but notes that one student stands out from the rest. Greeting Kahano, the girl notes how she despises him, being average in terms of looks and grades, but worst shows no interest towards her. With Kahano calling the girl Nishimura, the girl states that it isn't her name, prompting Kahano to reply that he only takes note of important people, apologizing as he was up all night. Having sat next to her for 3 months, Kahano still calls the girl wrong names, but the girl reiterates that her name is Akane Nishino, but Kahano clearly doesn't care, continuing to call her by different names. Realizing that Kahano never actually looked at her the entire time whilst they were conversing, Akane is suddenly pulled away by classmates, all adoring and complimenting her looks and talent. It's revealed that Akane had a massive scandal when she was younger, leaving several mental scars, and this was what led to her putting up barriers from others, hence her fake persona. Going through the day as she usually does, Akane wraps up and decides to head home for the day, calling her chauffeur but sadly gets no response. With no other option, Akane decides to walk home, but begins to grow afraid as it's getting quite dark. Suddenly a tall man blocks her path, forcing Akane to run in an opposing direction, but several other men appear, pulling up only to kidnap her. Before Akane is knocked out, she spots Kahano patiently watching, as her lifeless body is dragged into the men's van. Waking up in a warehouse, Akane realizes that the men are enemies of her father, intending to use Akane as leverage against her rich father. Outside, Kahano begins to disguise himself, scaling the warehouse's wall, all whilst the men make advances on Akane. Breaking in through a window, Kahano interrupts the men, drawing their attention and challenging the men. Spotting one of the men pulling out a gun, Kahano easily disarms and knocks out the first man, prompting a second one to pull out a gun. Being an ex-soldier, the second man chooses to fight honorably, relinquishing his gun, choosing to fight Kahano with a knife. As the man dashes towards Kahano, Kahano makes use of crowbars, managing to defend against the man's advances. Realizing the enemy is attempting to reach for his gun, Kahano swiftly knocks the man out, freeing Akane only to disappear before police arrive. With Akane's father's influence, Akane is able to keep the incident hidden from the public, returning to school the next day as if nothing had happened. Comedically later that evening, Kahano is hit by a truck, passing away instantly. Having always chased after getting stronger, Kahano was always thought of being a side character, even purposely not standing out at school, but secretly put in huge amounts of effort into fighting and training when he was alone. Having been reincarnated and given a second chance, we see Kahano narrate how he is now surrounded by gorgeous women, all under his command. With this new life and power, Kagenos deems himself the Eminence in the shadow. Having been reborn to a new family, Kahano notes how he still remembers his past life, but since he's a toddler he's forced to act the part, crying as to not arouse suspicion from his parents. Realizing this world functions on magic, Kahano learns that he is the son of Barun Kaganu, a man who trains dark knights. During training, Kahano purposely allows his older sister to get the spotlight when compared to his average self, but at Kahano night he dons his shadow gear, heading out to seek entertainment. Encountering several bandits, Kahano demands the bandits to hand over their loot, but when the bandits decide to fire projectiles at Kahano, Kangano is forced to handle the projectiles, showing off his moldable slime blade, easily deflecting and absorbing the projectiles. Spotting someone sneaking up on him, Kahano allows the man to slash him, but unveils his protective slime gear, laughing and disposing of all the men. Digging through the bandits' loot, Kahano is delighted to find a huge sum of gold, but hears something weird, wondering if the bandits had also kept a slave. Unveiling a cage, Kahano notices a horrid creature, having been amalgamated by some curse. Trying to break the curse, Kahano performs various experiments on the creature, successfully breaking the curse, returning the creature back to a blonde girl. When the blonde girl attempts to find out the reason for her being cursed, Kahano is able to make up a story, incorporating a made-up cult of Diablo, and how the blonde girl was destined to serve Kahano. Revealing his shadow form, Kahano is able to convince the blonde girl to join his newly formed Shadow Garden organization, bestowing her the name Alpha. With 3 years passing, Kahano admits that he has managed to keep his operations a secret all this time. Whilst sparring with his older sister, Kahano thinks about various ways to disarm and defeat his big sis, showing off his impressive knowledge of martial arts, having taken inspiration from his previous life. But Kahano intentionally allows his sister to defeat him, flung into a nearby river, only to monstrously hoist himself out of the water when his sister leaves the scene. As Kahano's sister turns 15, she prepares to head to mandatory magical school, but on the day of the departure, she is nowhere to be seen. Infuriating their father, Kahano notes that his organization has grown over the years, speaking to Beta, prompting Kahano to reveal that he recruited several other girls just like Alpha. Sending the girls to track down his sister's captives, Kahano manages to accidentally point out the captive's secret base, ordering the 7 shadows to head out with him immediately. Cutting to his sister, Claire, we see Claire chained up, but still has enough energy to avoid attacks from her kidnappers. As Claire chats with her kidnappers, the kidnapper mentions how he knows of Kahano, threatening to torture Kahano in order to break Claire's cold demeanor. Hearing the kidnapper threaten to use Kahano, Claire gets pissed, breaking her chains, attempting to punish the kidnapper, but is unfortunately knocked out when the kidnapper gets serious. Suddenly the kidnappers are alerted of an attack from 7 mysterious girls, all easily able to dispatch the kidnappers who are revealed to be as strong as royal guards. When the girls reveal themselves to the leader of the kidnappers, Alpha chooses to duel the leader, easily out-trading blows, but intentionally holds back, keeping the leader alive. Desperate, the leader pops a pill, surprising Alpha by smashing a hole in the ground and escaping. Unfortunately, the leader runs into Kahano, who has been lost in the kidnapper's dungeon this entire time. Charging at Kahano, Kahano notes how slow his enemy is moving, dodging and evading the leader's strikes, all whilst giving his enemy tips on how to move and fight better. Having easily dodged all of his enemy's strikes, Kahano spots the leader unleashing his final form, but is dispatched by Kahano before any real damage could be dealt. Noting that the leader had a daughter, Kahano heads home only to greet Claire, who had been left by Kahano to force herself out of the cell. With only several hours of sleep, Claire was only able to heal some of her wounds overnight, but immediately heads out for her first day at school. That evening, Kahano has a meeting with his Shadow Garden girls wanting to celebrate their organization growing so much, but Kahano is shocked to hear the girls have decided to leave Kahano. Several years later, Kahano is seen on a train thinking about the reason for the Shadow Garden disbanding. Apparently, the girls had all decided that it was about time they all grew up, and so they decided to leave Kahano. Just like in his previous life, Kahano noted how everyone around him grew out of believing in magic and heroes, but Kahano never stopped believing, revealing that he was the one who jumped in front of a truck, and got himself reincarnated. Having turned 15 years old, Kahano has decided to enroll at the same academy as his sister, the Midgar Academy for Dark Knights. Even at school, Kahano has perfected the art of blending in, picking out friends that don't stand out, nor have any outstanding traits. One day, Kahano and his mates are forced to cram into the train set to arrive at campus. Kahano and his 2 buddies envy the more prestigious and talented nobles, as they are allowed to live on campus, whereas the rest of the students must live elsewhere and commute to campus. Since Kahano had lost a bet to his friends, Kahano is forced to suffer a rejection from the most popular girl, Princess Alexia, in school. Arriving on campus, Kahano and friends spot Princess Alexia flat out rejecting another male student, all feeling sorry for the student. With his time to shine, Kahano purposely recreates a love confession scenario from the games he's played, intending to purposely get rejected. With his friends watching on, Kahano makes his move, confessing his love to Alexia, but shockingly Alexia accepts Kageno's confession, officially deeming them a couple. Heading to lunch the next day, Kahano can't help but feel every student glaring at him, all wondering why Kahano, a below-average guy in terms of skill and looks, is dating the princess. As Alexia joins Kahano and his mates for lunch, Kahano purposely steals her food, attempting to disgust the princess, but she simply brushes it off, instead offering Kahano to join and train in the same class as her, having easily arranged it with her connections. Later that day, Kahano is introduced to his new class and the instructor, Mr. Zenon. Having paired up with Alexia, the two stretch before they drill some swordplay. Analyzing her movements, Kahano notes that Alexia's movements are very bland and textbook, brutally stating that compared to her older sister she is a nobody. Wrapping up the session, Kahano overhears Alexia turning down Mr. Zenon's marriage proposal, but still knows he must continue his life in the background. That evening Kahano speaks to Alexia directly, confirming that she is using Kahano to fill in the boyfriend role in order to get Mr. Zenon off her back. Not liking how much attention he's getting, Kahano refuses at first to play along with Alexia's scheme, but is easily bribed into the role after Alexia tosses a few gold coins in Kahano's direction, claiming Kahano as her pet. With the two spending more time together, they purposely draw more attention in order to send a message to Mr. Zenon, but Mr. Zenon simply smirks at their relationship. Privately chatting, Alexia states that Mr. Zenon's perfection is too suspicious as Alexia prefers people who have flaws, like Kahano who she can tell has many flaws. With 2 weeks passing, the two ride the train together, all whilst Alexia talks about her older sister Iris, and how compared to her, Alexia is considered ordinary. Referencing the previous Bushin Combat Festival, Iris had witnessed Alexia's pathetic defeat, but Kahano tries to cheer Alexia up, mentioning how he likes Alexia's sword style. Refusing to elaborate on his opinion, Kahano annoys Alexia who storms off, leaving Kahano all alone. The next day, his friends attempt to find out how deep Kahano and Alexia's relationship is, but Kahano states that nothing too interesting happened, continuing to head to school. Right as Kahano and his mates arrive at school, Mr. Zenon and several men surround the trio, detaining Kahano for questioning, revealing that Princess Alexia has gone missing, and Kahano is the last known person seen with her. Cutting to Alexia, we see her in a mysterious place, tied up next to a beaten-up creature. Walking in, a mad scientist is excited to obtain royal blood from the princess, but this only disturbs Alexia. Back with Kahano, we see him being tortured, but Kahano thinks about how this is nothing, forcing himself to play along and pretend to be in pain. Back with Alexia, we see huge amounts of blood being drawn from Alexia, but the princess plays it cool, trying to gain intel and figure out the situation. Every so often the mad scientist attacks the creature, making Alexia feel bad for the creature, but suddenly the mad scientist remembers that he needs to feed Alexia. Following Mr. Zenon, we see that he's handing a report on his finding to Iris regarding Princess Alexia's disappearance, prompting Iris to question whether Kahano is even capable of kidnapping the princess, but decides to keep him chained up just in case. With Mr. Zenon promising to protect Iris and not allow what happened to Alexia to happen to Iris, the two overhear Claire making her way to Iris's office, demanding that her little brother Kahano is innocent. When Claire gets too rowdy, an upperclassman is forced to hold Claire back, all whilst Claire demands that Iris let her younger brother go. The entire time, Iris thinks about how distant she has grown with Alexia, unable to figure out the exact reason why they've grown so far apart. Eventually Kahano is freed from interrogation, heading home on the train, but notes that several men are following him. Hopping off the train, Kahano is whispered some words in passing by a mysterious person but continues back to his room nonchalantly. Waiting in his room, Alpha greets her master, noting that it has been a while, happy to see Kahano again. Gifting Kahano some food, she begins to help him get undressed, whilst reporting that the Shadow Garden has grown exponentially, but still fears that they are still nowhere in power compared to the cult of Diablo. Additionally, Alpha states that she believes that the cult is most likely responsible for kidnapping the princess, but asks that Kahano not act until she and the girls are able to confirm this. Before Alpha leaves, she asks for permission to kill the men that tortured her master, but Kahano states that they were only doing their job. As Alpha leaves, she relays a message from one of the girls, stating that Delta really misses Kahano. Cutting to Alexia, we see her completely messed up, barely able to utter words. With Kahano purchasing several props for his room, Kahano styles his room, hoping to impress his Shadow Garden girls when they come to visit. Just then, one of the girls appears to report their findings, impressed by Kahano's new room decorations. Hearing that his Shadow Garden has assembled 114 members to help scout and locate the princess, Kahano informs them that he has something to take care of first. Intercepting the two men that had tortured him, the men admit that they had attempted to frame Kahano for the kidnapping, but Kahano smirks and reveals his true form, instantly killing the men as revenge. Back with Alexia, we see her chatting with the creature, whispering something, right as the mad scientist rushes in, stating that there is a massive search party nearby. Afraid that he'll be captured and killed, he unveils his new demon creation device, injecting the extracted royal blood into his creature, but Alexia tries to warn against this. Believing he had created a masterpiece, the mad scientist is instantly killed by the creature, following up by freeing and thanking Alexia, only to begin digging to the surface. As Alexia curses her luck, she picks up a weapon, trying to find an escape through the facility and to safety. Turning a corner, she is greeted by Mr. Zenon, revealed to have funded the mad scientist, hoping to have made use of Alexia's royal blood. Mr. Zenon states that he intends to use the royal blood to gain power, but when Mr. Zenon tells Alexia that he intends on harming her sister Iris as well, Alexia gets pissed. Attempting to strike down Mr. Zenon states that Alexia pales in comparison to her big sister, but when Alexia attempts to copy her sister's skill, she unfortunately is unable to pull it off, losing her weapon. Completely helpless and on her knees, Alexia wonders how she can escape, but right on cue Kahano makes his grand entrance, revealing himself as Shadow. With Kahano arriving on the scene, Kahano mentions how he knows of Zenon's secret facilities, all being discovered and destroyed as they speak. Zenon calls out Kahano's bluff, believing that Kahano is simply playing dress-up and that none of Zenon's facilities have been discovered or attacked. Declaring that he'll obtain the 12th seat of a mysterious organization, Zenon lunges at Kahano, but Kahano easily evades, taunting Zenon's slow movements. Back on the surface, hundreds of people have begun to evacuate from the city, due to the mad scientist creature running rampant. With several dark knights fighting the creature reveals its ability to heal all wounds, ultimately besting the knights. As Iris steps in, Iris takes a stance, disappearing only to sever the creature's arm, following up by kicking it into a nearby building. Immediately creating new arms, the creature is unfazed, impressing Iris as she'll have to get serious. Igniting her blade, Iris continues to slice and dice the creature but makes no progress, forcing Alpha to reveal herself, intervening as Iris is taking too long. Dodging the creature's strike, Alpha unsheaths her own blade, bringing it down on the creature and incinerating its outer shell. Underneath the shell sits a girl hidden beneath the flesh. With Alpha's duty complete, she disappears, but not before informing Iris of the Shadow Garden. With several more explosions going off across the town, Iris continues to search for Alexia. Back with Kahano, we see him trading blows with Zenon, prompting Zenon to show off some of his true potential. But Kahano easily blocks Zenon's advances, even knocking Zenon down. Taunting Zenon once again, the two continue to clash blades, all whilst Alexia realizes that Kageno's blade style is very ordinary, reminding Alexia of how her blade style is very ordinary as well. Having had enough, Zenon reveals a capsule of pills, swallowing multiple pills and unveiling his final form. Charging up a deadly strike, Zenon lunges at Kahano, who welcomes the challenge. But as Zenon's artificial power swells up, Kahano gets pissed, refusing to entertain this duel as Zenon didn't work for this power, easily knocking down Zenon with his martial arts. Unleashing his shadow power, Kahano creates a ring around Zenon and himself, all whilst he recounts his dream of acquiring the power of an atomic bomb. Proud of how far he's come, Kahano continues to charge up a blast, but just then Zenon strikes Kahano with his blade, but upon impact Zenon's blade shatters. Releasing his power, Kahano deletes everything within the ring, impressing the Shadow Garden girls who admire their master's power, but the massive blast catches the attention of Iris. After the blast has cleared up, we see Iris finally making it to Alexia, who attempts to greet Iris, but Iris pulls Alexia in for a hug, relieved that her little sister is alive. Back at school, Alexia chats with Kahano, revealing that there have been no issues since his massive spectacle in town, relieving Kahano as he attempts to leave. Before he's able to, Alexia thanks him for teaching her to accept her sword style and that she wants to continue dating Kahano, now that Zenon is no longer an issue. The scene ends with Kahano flat out rejecting Alexia's offer, but this causes Alexia to get a little violent. Elsewhere, the Shadow Garden holds a meeting, continuing to investigate the cult of Diablo, whilst complimenting their master's power. But the issue of a copycat is brought to light, as the girls are aware that someone is using the Shadow Garden's name whilst doing evil deeds. At the same time, Iris chats about the Shadow Garden and the cult of Diablo's involvement, in the previous incident, to Glenn and Marco. Iris reveals a mysterious device, trusting Glenn and Marco with the item's secrecy. Back at school, Kahano bumps into a pink-haired girl, apologizing for not seeing her, offering to help her up, even though he's clearly bleeding from rejecting Alexia. During lunch, Kahano is questioned by his friends, asking whether he and Alexia had kissed, but he once again reminds them, nothing of the sort transpired. Changing topics, Kahano's friends ask if Kahano wants to visit a new shop selling chocolate, but Kahano accepts the offer, wondering what chocolates in this world tastes like. Cutting elsewhere, we see Iris and Alexia discuss the mysterious artifact with the pink-haired girl, Sherry Barnett, and her father, believing that Sherry is capable of deciphering this item's use. Apparently the artifact had been found in the aftermath of the fight with the cult of Diablo, which frightens Sherry, not wanting to be trusted with such an important item, but with some encouraging words from her father, Sherry agrees to help. Showing off her newly formed Crimson Knights, Iris assigns them to protect Sherry, allowing the curious Alexia to take part as well. Having arrived at the chocolate store, the trio wait in the absurdly long queue, whilst gossiping about a mysterious killer on the loose. Noting all the prestigious people lined up, the three are interrupted by a store clerk, asking for one of them to take a survey. Choosing Kahano as the volunteer, the clerk takes Kahano up the building and into a throne room, where members of the Shadow Garden greet him. Realizing that Gamma owns this chocolate store, Kahano is impressed by Gamma's progression, having only told her about chocolate in his past life, yet she had been able to recreate and turn it into a business. With Gamma taking a fall, she asks Kahano to take his throne, and in exchange Kahano rewards the girls with a spectacle. Asking if Gamma is profitable, Gamma reveals that she has opened several other stores, overall profiting 1 billion zeni. Additionally, Gamma reminds Kahano of a killer impersonating the Shadow Garden, warning Kahano to be careful. Before Kahano heads out, he asks for some chocolate, but at the same time manages to steal some of Gamma's gold. Rushing back to their dorms before curfew, Kahano jokingly suggests that Alexia is the serial killer, after what she did to him when he refused her confession, but Kahano suddenly hears fighting nearby. Using the excuse of an upset stomach, Kahano manages to separate himself from the other two. Observing Alexia and Shadow Garden copycats fight, Kahano is forced to assist Alexia when she's outnumbered. Right as Alexia faints, Kahano chases after several of the enemy, but allows one of his Shadow Garden girls to catch all the copycats. Elsewhere, a mysterious knight, deemed the Gaunt Knight, reveals that he has finally located the mysterious artifact that he has been searching for. That same night, Alexia reports to Iris that she had run into Shadow Garden impersonators, but since Iris is yet to decide who are the good and bad guys, Iris declares that both the Shadow Garden and the cult of Diablo are both her enemies. The next day, Kahano and his friends all agree to confess to their crushes, making use of the chocolates Kahano was able to secure as a gift to their crushes. Sadly, both Kahano's friends are rejected, as they both are considered disgusting to their crushes. Left alone with a box of chocolates, Kahano spots Sherry studying, reasoning that it should be fine to give his box of chocolates to her. That evening, Carrie learns that the chocolates are a sign of love, getting flustered thinking of Kahano, but chooses to focus on deciphering the artifact. With her father entering, Carrie's father shows signs of growing weak from age, beginning to cough. As they share a moment, Carrie thanks her father for adopting her, reminded that her father's wife was also a researcher just like Carrie is. Following Kahano, we see him chatting with one of the Shadow Garden girls, Nu, who had blended in as a student to report her findings regarding the shadow imposters they've captured. Having been brainwashed by the cult of Diablo, Nu was unfortunately unable to extract any valuable information regarding the copycat. Whilst Nu is talking, Kahano thinks about how his mates recently had signed him up to participate in the upcoming Bushin Festival, dreading the thought of having to perform for others. With his two mates stating that Kahano can draw the attention of other girls, Kahano swiftly strikes the two in their stomachs, as revenge for betraying him. Nu continues, revealing that they suspect that it's quite normal for the cult of Diablo to kidnap and brainwash children, raising them as cult members. Additionally, Nu believes that the imposters may be luring the actual Shadow Garden in by attempting to impersonate and tarnish their names. Nu states that they've discovered that there are named children, cult members that have been able to withstand the brainwashing, one in particular named Rex. Parting ways with Nu, Kahano is deep in thought, leaving Nu to wonder what being a student may feel like. With the Bushin event starting, we see Claire easily dispatch her target, all whilst several students including Kageno's mates, gather around the betting board for the upcoming matches. Next up is student council Rose Oriana, supposedly the best swordsman in the academy, who is set to face Kahano. Knowing no one is cheering for him, Kahano reasons it would be best to end this duel quickly and not draw too much attention, signaling both Kahano and Rose to dash at one another. Right before Rose's blade strikes Kahano, he slips some fake blood into his mouth, taking Rose's strike to the chest and purposely spitting out the fake blood to make the battle seem more intense. Continuing to play into the match, Kahano refuses to give up, impressing Rose as she welcomes Kahano's determination. Continuing to strike down Kahano multiple times, Kahano allows himself to be flung and struck multiple times, each time getting back up. With Rose confused as to why Kahano is still standing, Rose decides to charge up her next strike, ready to cut Kahano down, but right before she can reach Kahano, they are interrupted by the judge, who feels sorry for Kahano, deeming the match to be over in Rose's favor. Ultimately, Kahano is able to gain the respect from Rose, but needs to be wrapped up as he needs people to believe he's injured. Heading through the school, Kahano is stopped by Sherry, who wants to have a chat. Having watched his match, Sherry gives Kahano a gift out of love, but Kahano believes it is a reward for putting on a good show in his last match. With both Kahano and Sherry agreeing to be friends, Sherry tells her father the good news, revealed to have been sitting right beside the two. Apparently, Sherry's father is a man who is both competent at martial arts and academics, and was a previous Bushin Festival champion. In other words, Kahano doesn't want to associate with such an influential man, fearing that it will make Kahano stand out too much. With Sherry and her father checking on Kahano's injuries, her father asks for Kahano to take care of Sherry, which Kahano is not fond of, deciding that it would be best to stay home for a while and lay low. That evening, Sherry thinks of Kahano whilst eating the chocolates he gave her, stopping to think about how close Claire is to Kahano. Cutting to Claire enjoying a nice cup of coffee, she is interrupted by Sherry, who had come to visit. Offering Sherry a cup of coffee, Claire watches as Sherry dumps loads of sugar into her drink, amazed at her childish palate. Assuming that Sherry wanted to talk about the artifact she had been assigned to investigate, Claire is corrected, as Sherry is here to talk about Kahano. Asking if Claire is still in a committed relationship with Kahano, Claire is forced to reveal that they had broken up, which pleases Sherry. As Sherry recounts her interaction with Kahano, Claire has no choice but to swallow her jealousy, shaking profusely, knowing that Sherry is after Kahano as well. The next day, we see Kahano chatting with his mates, waiting for the student council to announce how elections will work. At that exact moment, we see the Gaunt Knight activate a mysterious item, alerting Kahano as he senses a mysterious barrier being projected suddenly out of nowhere. Attempting to use magic, Kahano realizes that his spells aren't working, wondering why no one else had noticed the barrier. Suddenly several men burst into their class, claiming to be part of Shadow Garden and revealing that they have taken over the school. With Rose refusing to surrender to the imposters, she attempts to imbue her blade with magic, but realizes her magic is being nullified, leaving herself wide open. As the masked man slashes at Rose, Kahano rushes to intercept, pushing Rose out of the way and taking the slash and collapsing to the ground, bleeding out. When students go to check on Kahano, they confirm that Kahano has no pulse, prompting Rose to thank Kahano for his sacrifice. Forced to follow the masked men's orders, all students are forced to gather in the school's hall, all spotting the Gaunt Knight watching over them. Now that Kahano is alone, he forces his arm to artificially restart the beating in his heart, using tiny shadow threads to assist with restarting his heart. Accepting the invaders' challenge, Kahano heads out to investigate the reason for this school invasion. Following Sherry, we see her interrupted by Rex, attempting to retrieve the artifact she's currently investigating. Before Rex is able to attack her, the assigned knight Glenn arrives, protecting Sherry. Clashing blades with Rex, we see Marco take care of other masked men, making a path for Sherry to escape. Back with Kahano, we see him scanning the school and taking note of everything in his surroundings. Applauding the enemy's tactics, Kahano gets annoyed, knowing that the enemies have invaded his school without style. Slowly picking off enemies one at a time, Kahano spots the adorable Sherry running through the school, secretly clearing a path for and keeping her alive. Deeming it as time, Kahano jumps from his location, choosing to meet up with Sherry. Whilst Sherry makes her way around the school, Kahano is forced to dispatch approaching enemies, revealing himself when Sherry falls down the stairs. Scolding her oblivious personality, the two make their way to the assistant principal's office where Sherry explains that the Eye of Avarice is probably the cause of magic being blocked in the school, but Kahano notes how the enemy was able to use their magic, no problem. Sherry also mentions that the Eye of Avarice is only able to absorb certain amounts of magic, exploding and releasing absorbed magic that exceeds its capacity. Finally, Sherry states that the artifact she had been studying is able to stop such a blast, which gives the two an idea. Once Sherry has decoded the artifact, she'll head near the Eye of Avarice, via some secret tunnels in the school and disarm the eye. Back with Rex, we see him admitting to the Gaunt Knight that he lost Sherry, but the Gaunt Knight orders Rex to go hunt down Sherry, demanding Rex not to fail again. Before Rex leaves, he warns Gaunt to beware the Shadow Garden, heading out to explore the school. Out of nowhere, Rex is attacked by Kahano, projecting a barrier in hopes to slow down Kahano, but Kahano easily breaks past Rex's barrier, flinging Rex into a room filled with all the masked men Kahano had killed. Before we can see Kahano slay Rex, we cut to Sherry's office, where Nu is seen putting Glenn and Marco to rest, sympathizing with them as they gave their lives to protect Sherry. Just then Kahano appears, greeting Nu, who reports that several of the Shadow Garden girls are in position, and awaiting Kageno's orders. Retrieving tools, Kahano tells the girls to wait for Sherry to finish deciphering the artifact, and only then will they make a move. As the sun begins to set on the school, we see Sherry concentrating on deciphering the artifact, finally breaking through and turning it on. Heading to a secret passage, Sherry reveals to Kahano the hidden tunnel that goes under the school, but suddenly stops. Thinking back, Sherry relives the moment when she had witnessed her own mother's death, but luckily her current father had adopted her, hoping that if anything, at least her father is alive once everything is over. Just like that, Kahano asks Sherry to be careful, and watches as Sherry enters the tunnels, heading in search of the source of the barrier. Cutting to the Gaunt Knight, he wonders what could be taking Rex so long, but right at that moment, we see several students helplessly shot down by some of the Gaunt Knight's men, who seem to be toying with the students. Back with Sherry, we see her clearly afraid of the dark endless tunnel, but ultimately musters up the courage to make it through the tunnels only to appear in the school hall. Looking around the hall, Sherry locates the eye in the hands of the Gaunt Knight, but knows that she can still disable the eye. Immediately activating her artifact, Sherry tosses her artifact towards the Gaunt Knight, managing to disable the eye and bring down the anti-magic barrier. Feeling her magic come back, Rose immediately takes the opportunity to attack the enemy, rallying the students to follow after her. As the Gaunt Knight sends his men to stall the students, we see Nu watching as the battle unfolds. With Rose courageously fighting, she begins to tire out, but is confident that the students will continue to fight, even if she were to be killed. Being surrounded by several men, Rose begins to accept her fate, but just then Kahano descends through the glass ceiling. With Kahano thanking Rose for stalling the attackers, Kahano reveals the true Shadow Garden, sending his girls to finish off the men. Rose takes the opportunity to evacuate the remaining students, whilst Kahano locks onto the Gaunt Knight, spotting the Gaunt Knight trying to sneak away during the chaos. Having exited the hall, the Gaunt Knight sets the entire school on fire, earning the praise from Gamma, who applauds the Gaunt Knight's bold tactic. Spotting multiple students gathering outside the school hall, Iris rushes to the wounded students, learning from Rose that the real Shadow Garden has protected the students. Back at Sherry's father's office, we see the Gaunt Knight is revealed to be Sherry's father, burning the books in the office and aiming to not leave any evidence. Just then Sherry's father is interrupted by Kahano stating that he's aware of the identity of the Gaunt Knight, prompting Sherry's father to remove heavy armor disguise. Questioning the knight, Kahano learns that Carrie's father had reached the limit of his power after becoming the champion of the Bushin Festival, and ever since then he had been searching for a cure for his disease, hoping to have more time to train in this world. Having stumbled upon Sherry's mother, he believed that Sherry's mother would be someone to cure him, but sadly he was disappointed and afraid that she would only hold him back. Without hesitation, Sherry's father killed Sherry's mother, only to adopt Sherry. The entire time, Sherry had no clue, even accepting the gaunt knight as her father. Having heard enough, Kahano faces off Sherry's father, allowing Sherry's father to easily cut down Kahano, sending him crashing out of the room's window. But when Sherry's father begins to leave the room, he senses a strange presence enter the room, shocked to see Kahano as don his shadow form. Knowing that Kahano's aura surpasses his own, Sherry's father takes out the Eye of Avarice, unlocking it and having it lend him its strength. With Kahano approaching Sherry's father, we see Sherry's father transforming, having gained immense power from the artifact. Dashing at Kahano, Sherry's father attempts to cut down Kahano, but his strikes are all blocked by Kahano, who begins to listen to Sherry's father's words. No longer holding back, Sherry's father reveals that he has planned to have Shadow Garden blamed for all the murders that have been happening, but unbeknownst to him, Kahano reveals that Shadow Garden isn't a righteous organization. Beginning to push back, Kahano catches Sherry's father with his blade, deciding to avenge Sherry's mother, skewering Sherry's father and leaving him to bleed out. Right before Kahano leaves, he spots Sherry rush to her father's side, oblivious of what her father had done, but decides to allow Sherry to live on, believing that Shadow was the villain in her life. After everything that has happened, we see Alpha and several other Shadow Garden girls learn that they've been pinned for the crimes of the copycats, but since their master Kahano is okay with that, they reason that they should strive to exceed Kahano's expectations. With the school closing down, Kahano chats with Sherry, who has decided to study abroad. Before the two part ways, Kahano asks the reason for Sherry leaving, but Sherry thinks for a bit, deciding to keep the reason a secret. With the school under reconstruction, summer break has been moved forward. Following several of the Shadow girls, we see them go on with their days, zooming into one of the girls, Epsilon, who is seen reminiscing on her first time meeting Kahano. Cutting to another Shadow girl, Beta, we see her fantasizing about stories where she is the damsel in distress and Kahano is her savior. Ultimately, both Epsilon and Beta meet up, fighting over who Kahano is more attracted to, using their bodies as metrics. Cutting to Iris and Alexia, we see the two spend time together shopping, in preparation for summer break. As Gamma greets the two, she overhears Alexia wanting to purchase clothes to impress someone, pointing Alexia to some lingerie. Iris attempts to stop Alexia, but is seduced, ultimately unable to stop her adorable grown sister from buying what she wants. Flashing back, after the students had evacuated the burning school, we followed Rose searching for Kahano, who had to her knowledge survived his near-death experience. Happy to see Kahano alive, she accepts his love, cutting to the current situation. Having bumped into Rose at the station, they both learn that they're heading to the same destination, prompting Rose to offer Kahano a seat with her and refusing to take no as an answer. Now with the two alone, Rose moves closer to Kahano, whilst Kahano moves away, trying to deny her advances. As Rose prays for her and Kageno's relationship to prosper, the two head to the sacred land of Lindworm. Stopping by a souvenir shop, Kahano learns that Lindworm once housed a hero that had sealed Diablo's left arm, but notices a pop-up book signing nearby. Rose mentions how she loves the author Natsumi, as they vary in genres but are still so immersive. Checking out Natsumi's books himself, Kahano realizes that the stories are ripped off from famous books from his world. Realizing that Natsumi is one of his Shadow Garden girls, Beta, he is surprised to see that she had remembered the stories he told her when she was younger. As Natsumi signs Kahano's book, she also writes down his next mission, stating that it has been assigned from Alpha. Sitting down to read their signed copies, both Rose and Kahano are surprised to see that Beta had written in ancient letters to Kahano, but Kahano realizes something, convincing Rose to not worry about what Beta had written for him. That night, we see Alpha investigate the mysteries behind the town's church, all whilst Kahano watches over the city, whilst enjoying a snack. Noting a figure running along the town's roofs, Kahano cuts him off, attempting to question him, but Epsilon kills him first. Praising Epsilon's skills, Kahano learns of an executioner in the cult of Diablo, but not wanting to think too much about it, Kahano leaves Epsilon, setting out onto his next mission with his own plan. The next day, Kahano enters a hot spring bath, nonchalantly stripping and bathing next to the shy and flustered Alexia. Wondering why Kahano is here, Alexia finds out that Kahano is also here for the goddess trial, just like her. The goddess trial is an event that occurs once every year, and involves warriors summoning and challenging dead warriors to fight, and the revived warriors accept the duel only if they deem the challenger worthy. People partake in this ritual, hoping to prove their skills, as only 10 warriors are given the opportunity. Apparently a wandering swordsman by the name of Venom had challenged the hero of the town, Olivier, during the ritual but stood no chance against the hero. Chatting with Alexia, Kahano learns that there is news that the archbishop at a nearby cathedral has been murdered. Just then, Alexia attempts to get Kahano to join the Crimson Knights, but Kahano sternly declines all offers, giving Alexia the idea of trying to seduce Kahano. But Kahano is not interested in her body, unveiling his holy weapon, leaving Alexia in complete shock. With the goddess trial's opening ceremony commencing, we see Archbishop Jack Nelson make a speech reminding the town folk of the history of the hero Olivier's, and how they were able to seal the disaster that is Diablo. Apparently, Archbishop Jack had refused to allow Alexia and her Crimson Knights to investigate the death of the previous archbishop, having declared the investigation a private matter. Back in the present, Alexia is forced to put on an act, as she is the sole representative of her kingdom. Noticing the famous author Natsumi next to her, she is amazed at the attention Natsumi is getting, especially her amazing looks and body, jealous of Natsumi's curves. Natsumi also notices the princess staring at her, but gets jealous that Alexia is living the life Natsumi always wanted, close and nonchalant with Kahano. Frustrated, Alexia steps on Natsumi's foot, attempting to get Natsumi to act up and embarrass herself, but Natsumi is able to keep cool, glaring at Alexia. Interrupting the two, Archbishop Jack announces the beginning of the trial, creating a barrier around the arena to protect the onlookers and sending out their first warrior. Apparently, if a warrior is summoned, a duel will not end until one of the fighters is knocked out or killed, but it's quite common for warriors to risk their lives, as beating a summon will ensure they have a comfortable future. Sitting and observing as warriors attempt to summon challengers, Kahano thinks about how much fun it would be if he himself were to don his shadow form and fight the warriors himself. As the sun begins to set, Kahano suddenly hears his name being called, but Kahano sits for a while and thinks about his options. He can enter the arena and risk summoning a powerful opponent and reveal his true strength. He can run away, but the school and his sister will exile him, or he can choose option 3. Transforming into shadow, Kahano reasons that it would be best to distract and cause a scene, drawing the attention of Archbishop Jack and all the onlookers. Having entered the arena, Kahano is assessed by the trial, summoning a powerful being as his challenger. With Alexia and Rose asking Natsumi who the mysterious challenger is, Natsumi states that she is Aurora, the Witch of Calamity, capable of destroying the whole world. Since Natsumi's knowledge on the witch is quite limited, Natsumi chooses to learn more about the witch from Archbishop Jack, using slow and subtle movements to seduce the archbishop. As both Rose and Alexia show their disdain towards the archbishop's behavior, the archbishop wonders if Kahano can truly face off against a calamity like Aurora. Facing one another, Aurora and Kahano both can sense each other's overflowing power, both honored to face another powerful warrior. Channeling several spells, Aurora goes on the offensive, striking at Kahano with her magic, but Kahano easily dodges each subsequent attack, even using the magic's momentum to maneuver around Aurora, all whilst observing her movements. Realizing that Aurora is being held back by something mysterious in the duel, Kahano determines it would be best to end her suffering, ending the match, and escaping out the arena. Upon his exit, the trial ends and a giant spell is suddenly cast, shattering the barrier protecting the onlookers. As all the Shadow Garden girls observe what is happening in the arena, we cut to Kahano, who is proud of the spectacle he had put on, but just then Kahano notices a door appear next to him. Attempting to run away, the door simply chases after him, but this makes him realize that this may be the work of Aurora, entering the door to figure out the reason for this. Back at the arena, we see a similar door open up, catching the eye of the archbishop as he calls the door a gate to a sanctuary. Having responded to Kahano's power, the door begins to open completely, prompting everyone to evacuate. Before the archbishop himself leaves, the Shadow Garden girls appear, leaving Epsilon to prevent the girls or the archbishop to escape, whilst Alpha and the others head into the gate. Using Natsumi as a bargaining chip, Epsilon attempts to hold the girls back, but Archbishop could care less, calling the executioner Venom to attack Epsilon. Slicing at her torso, Epsilon dodges out of the way, but her fake breasts are severed and revealed. Flustered, Epsilon speeds up her movements, managing to slow time around them and using the opportunity to kill the executioner. Pissed that the Archbishop exposed her, Epsilon drags the Archbishop into the gate with her, prompting Alexia and Rose to follow after them, right as the gate closes behind them. Appearing on the other side, Natsumi and Alexia continue to bicker, forcing Alpha to intervene, silencing the two. Inside this sanctuary, Alpha stops in front of a statue of the hero Olivier, who mysteriously resembles Alpha, both being a cursed elf. Knowing that the Archbishop is hiding things, Alpha unlocks a hidden passageway, prompting the hero Olivier herself to mysteriously appear. Cutting to Kahano, we see him greeting Aurora, who reveals that she has forgotten all her memories, begging Kahano to free her. Cutting her free, Aurora asks for Kahano's help to escape this sanctuary, believing that once they break the core of the sanctuary, they're free to go. With no other choice, Kahano agrees, exciting Aurora as she calls Kahano her valiant knight. Entering one of Aurora's memory, Aurora spots her younger self crying, choosing to discipline her younger self, making Kahano wonder why she is being so harsh. Back with Alpha, it's revealed that the cult of Diablo had captured children attempting to fuse them with demon cells, to create a specimen that would be capable of rivaling Diablo's power. It's revealed that only Olivier has been able to withstand the demon cells. Apparently, the cult had attempted to capture the great demon Diablo itself, but any damage inflicted on the creature would be instantly healed. Luckily, the cult had managed to cut off Diablo's left arm, restraining it and sealing it away, only to use the arm as research, developing pills that would grant people tremendous power and immortality. As the Archbishop was in charge of research, he reveals the pills are actually called demon beads, and that he himself has been making use of them. Alpha states that she knows that the demon beads have two side effects. The first is that the Archbishop must take a bead every year and only 12 beads can be produced every year. Coincidentally, there are 12 leaders of the cult of Diablo, revealing that Archbishop Jack currently holds the 11th seat in the cult. Having been exposed, Archbishop Jack begins to transform, but one of the Shadow Girls swiftly kills and throws the Archbishop from a height, but the Archbishop reappears having successfully transformed. Swiping his hands, the Archbishop splits the girls into separate groups, pulling them into different realities, intending to deal with them separately. Seeing the Archbishop duplicate, Delta attacks and kills several of his clones, but realizes that the Archbishop is luring her in and feeding off her power. Using his skills to summon more clones, Archbishop plans to tire out Delta, but Delta welcomes the challenge. Cutting to Kahano and Aurora, we see the two make their way into another of Aurora's memories, walking through the aftermath of a battlefield. Aurora attempts to slay her younger self, but is attacked by undead soldiers, forcing Kahano to step and take her to safety. Seeing as the memories are becoming more violent, Kahano and Aurora reason that the sanctuary is most likely rejecting the two, attempting to stop them from moving closer to the core. Following Epsilon, we see her and a group of girls find their own path, encountering an undead. Noticing something off, Epsilon passes through the undead, realizing that the sanctuary is probably testing them, trying to use their past memories to stop them. The Shadow Girls wonder if they may have also fallen victim and gone through the cult of Diablo's brainwashing, if Kahano had not found them. Stumbling into a library filled with records, the girls all begin snapping photos of various files with their crafted cameras, believing that the files may come in handy later on. Spending a while capturing everything, the girls realize that their clothes are beginning to dissolve, sensing that their magic is being absorbed, prompting all the girls to hurry up, but just then, Epsilon's fake breasts are exposed. With Kahano and Aurora fighting the endless swarms of undeads, Kahano brings his blade down on Aurora's past self, ending the memory and transporting them to a different room. Finally, the two have reached the center of the sanctuary, both noticing a sword wedged into the ground. Back with Delta, we see her overcome the Archbishop's magic-stealing skill, continuing to dispatch his clones. Knowing that Delta has transformed, the Archbishop attempts to ramp up the number of clones, but Delta summons an iron slab, bringing it down on all of the clones at once. Knowing that the chains are blocking Kahano from the center of the sanctuary, Kahano holds himself back, as he doesn't want to shatter his current blade whilst trying to destroy the chains. Checking out the grounded sword, Kahano reads the inscription which states that only supposed descendants may draw the sword, forcing Aurora and Kahano to think of a plan. Back with Delta slaughtering the Archbishop's clones, Delta had forced him to dissolve his White Room spell, and returned the girls, back in front of the hero's statue. Realizing that he is cornered, the Archbishop calls for the hero Olivie, but before Olivie can do anything, the other Shadow Garden girls reappear, halting everyone as Alpha states that they've accomplished what they came here to do. With Alpha retreating for now, the Archbishop mocks their cowardice attitude, but Alpha and the girls ignore him, retreating. Knowing that he'll get in trouble, the Archbishop attempts to fabricate a story to report to the higher-ups, but is interrupted, alerted that there are people present near the center of the sanctuary. Back with Kahano, he and Aurora chat, only to notice the Archbishop and Olivie appear through a portal. Sending Olivie to kill the two, Kahano meets her blade, but is sent all over the place, taking Olivie's blows, whilst observing her movements. Having seen Kahano endure enough, Aurora interrupts, offering herself to the Archbishop in exchange for letting Kahano live. Refusing to allow Aurora to sacrifice herself, Kahano tells Aurora to not worry, but just then Olivie plunges her sword through Kageno's body. But Kahano reveals that everything has gone according to plan, grabbing onto her and taking a bite out of Olivie. Kahano is able to shatter Olive's body, revealing that he had intentionally avoided any strikes to his vital organ. Since Kahano didn't want to catch Olivie, he had purposely lured Olivie in close, only to trap and target her weak spot. Surprising the Archbishop, Kahano walks towards the Archbishop, who congratulates Kahano, but reveals the sanctuary's true power. Hundreds of Olivies are revealed, all rushing towards Kahano, all ready to cut Kahano down. Stating that he's done hiding, Kahano unsheathes his slime blade, easily killing several of the clones with a single slash. Kahano mentions how he had converted his slime magic to a solid blade, unable to be hindered or absorbed, basically a perfect spell. With the clones continuing to attack Kahano, he double-checks that the only way out is to pass the chained wall, which Aurora confirms. Knowing he should end this quickly, Kahano begins charging up a powerful spell, ignoring all the damage he's receiving only to release his atomic power. Emerging from a body of water, we spot Kahano's Shadow Garden girls, along with Alexia and Rose, all admiring the massive explosion. Sinking into some form of abyss, Kahano is faced with the sealed left arm of Diablo, taking a stance, but is unable to defend as the arm lunges towards him, revealed to be Aurora. Waking up, Kahano notices that Aurora is disappearing. Giving their final words, the two share that they were glad to have met each other, only for Aurora to disappear, hoping for her real body to be found by Kahano. Cutting to Alexia, Rose and Natsumi, we see Alexia frustrated, being dragged along helplessly as she doesn't know what had just transpired. Adding to this, Rose mentions how none of them know of what the Shadow Garden is or what they are facing, still unable to determine who is the bad guy and who's the good guy. Coming up with an idea, Alexia decides to form their own group, all agreeing to grow stronger together. At the same time, Alpha and Epsilon discuss how the whole sanctuary, along with all the items within it, had been incinerated due to Kageno's overwhelming power, but they all conclude that Aurora had been hiding her real name, the Great Demon Diablo. Following Gamma, we see her mentioning that she had perfected the production of petroleum, setting her sights on rebuilding a city from scratch. Immediately putting the Shadow Garden to work, but at the same time, we see Alpha thinking about how far her girls have grown ever since they met Kahano. Cutting to Iris and Alexia, we see them spending time in a sauna together, only for Alexia to ask for Iris's help to convince their father to investigate neighboring countries. Luckily Iris had already considered the idea, but their father had ordered Iris to not make a move. Iris admits that even though she is regarded as one of the best swordsmen in the kingdom, she has little to no influence on what the kingdom chooses to do. Therefore Iris states that by winning the Bushin Festival, she'll be able to gain influential forces on par with the Shadow Garden and the cult of Diablo. Hearing this, Alexia warns Iris of the dangers, reminding Iris that both the cult of Diablo and Shadow Garden are still hiding things that even they cannot fathom, an example is the huge purple explosion Kahano set off in town. Knowing that she must fight regardless of who stands in her way for the better of her country, Iris changes topics, realizing something. Wondering what took Alexia so long that the other country, Alexia is forced to hide the fact that she had encountered both the cult of Diablo and the Shadow Garden from Iris, coming up with an excuse only to swiftly leave the sauna. Cutting to Rose, we see her practice her fencing, reminded of a mysterious man that once saved her, but suddenly feels a sharp pain in her chest. Standing upon a clock tower, Kahano scans the surrounding town, watching as hundreds of warriors flood the city in preparation for the upcoming Bushin Festival. Knowing that there are all types of warriors, each with different builds and fighting styles present, Kahano makes it his one goal of finding the strongest opponent, reasoning that he should at least have some fun and put on a spectacle for the onlookers. Visiting Gamma, Kahano asks for her help with a disguise, in order to partake in the Bushin Festival, all whilst concealing his true identity. Immediately following her master's request, Gamma takes out a wardrobe of items, showing off some slime meant to reshape Kageno's face. Given various personalities to adopt, Kahano settles on the mundane man, reasoning that since the actual person no longer exists, there shouldn't be any issues becoming him. With assistance from several of the Shadow Garden girls, Kahano is able to impersonate the mundane man, even adopting his slumped-over posture to match his behavior. Before Kahano leaves, Gamma attempts to give Kahano some extra clothing, but she clumsily trips over the stairs. Walking through the streets, Anaros from the prestigious Seven Blades encounters the disguised Kahano, feeling sorry for his pitiful look. Offering some advice, Anaros asks that Kahano not take part in the upcoming Bushin Festival, as his weapons and statue will surely get him badly hurt. Refusing Anaros's advice, Kahano leaves her, happy to see the disguise is working flawlessly, but out of nowhere is stopped by the heavily hunked Quinton. Also noticing Kahano's weak aura, Quinton orders Kahano to not partake in the festival, not wanting weaklings to ruin his fun, all whilst flaunting his own achievements over Kahano. Kahano plays into Quinton's ego, stating that Quinton is nothing compared to himself, managing to rile Quinton up, only to receive a punch that sends Kahano into a nearby alleyway. Assessing the situation, Kahano thinks about ways to instantly dispatch Quinton, noting that the eyes would be the most efficient. But of course, Kahano chooses to allow Quinton to pummel him, forcing Anaros to intervene and stop Quinton. As Quinton leaves, Kahano is left alone with Anaros, apologizing for not stepping in earlier, but she reasoned that Kahano needed to understand the type of people he'll be facing if he enters the tournament. Thanking her for looking out for him, Kahano reveals that he is not injured, piquing Anaros's interest, prompting both to introduce themselves. The next day, sitting down with one of his mates, Kahano attempts to learn who to look out for in the tournament, learning that his mate reckons Quinton may have a fighting chance, along with Rose or possibly the returning champion Iris. Changing topics, Kahano's mates ask for some money from Kahano, dead set on winning big by betting on the people they've just talked about. Ignoring his friend's words, Kahano hands him a souvenir he got from the town of Lindworm, heading home only to bump into Rose. Happy to hear that Rose has been hanging out with Alexia and Natsumi, Kahano is surprised to learn that Rose is getting engaged to her arranged fiancé, offering to listen to her thoughts. Noting the sadness in her face, Rose states that she must make not only her father proud but her whole kingdom regardless of her own feelings, being the princess of the kingdom. Before the two part ways, Kahano promises to be there for Rose in the future, relieving Rose as she's thankful that Kahano was willing to listen to her vent. With the beginning of the Bushin Festival, we see Kahano and his mates watch over several preliminary duels, all whilst his friend attempts to analyze each player's skills, hoping it'll help with his future bets. Running into Goldie Gilded, Kahano sneaks off to change into the mundane man, all whilst the unbeaten legend, Goldie, brags about being able to read a person's power level. Starting off with Kahano's next opponent, Goldie scans his power level, stating that Kahano's opponent has a power level of 1364 compared to Kahano's power level of 33. With Kahano's duel starting, he instantly knocks out his opponent, making everyone believe that his opponent tripped, but having watched the match, Anaros is able to see Kahano's lightning punches, managing to land two simultaneous punches, all whilst playing it off as if his opponent tripped. Believing that Kahano's opponent tripped, Goldie reveals that he will be Kahano's next opponent, heading off to make preparations for their duel. The next morning Kahano awakes to his friend banging on the door, learning that Rose had apparently stabbed her own fiancé, and is now on the run. Cutting to Alexia and Natsumi, having also just heard of Rose's crime. They note how Rose is from a prestigious family, both speculating that Rose probably won't get the death penalty, but will still be severely punished. Alexia and Natsumi both agree that they should talk to Rose themselves, believing that there is more to Rose's story. At the same time we pan to Rose desperately running along the underground tunnels, seemingly fleeing from something. With Alexia searching for Rose herself, Natsumi is tasked with investigating Rose's fiancé, who Natsumi suspects is the cause of all of this, having several unsavory rumors surrounding him. Natsumi thinks about how she knows where Rose is currently at, instructing her Shadow Garden girls to continue to keep track of Rose, but also notices that there is something wrong with Rose's chest. Back with Kahano, we see him watch several other duels, all whilst his friend continues to bet on them. Heading out of his seat, Kahano passes below the stands, walking by a warrior who stops Kahano, stating that she knows Kahano has been hanging around elves. Wondering what this person could be talking about, Kahano realizes that she may be referring to Alpha, telling the warrior that he is unaware of any elves in his life. Seeing the warrior draw her blade ready to strike, Kahano knows she only intends to test him, but to make himself look weak, Kahano intentionally falls back, surprising her as she expected Kahano to be much stronger and not flinch at all. Before they part way, the elf apologizes, introducing herself as Beatrix. Elsewhere, Quentin congratulates Anarose on passing the goddess trial, but Anarose is distracted by Kahano's mundane man disguise. Suspecting Kahano could possibly match her power, piquing Quentin's interest. Finally facing off against the undefeated Goldie, it's revealed that Goldie is undefeated because he purposely handpicks opponents he knows he can beat, choosing to surrender to any stronger opponents to save himself the pain. With Goldie and Kahano standing face to face, Goldie makes the first move, lunging at Kahano, aiming for his head. Moving his head by an inch, Kahano nonchalantly dodges, following up by emitting a powerful aura that plants a picture of Goldie's death in Goldie's own mind. Scared stiff, Goldie watches as Kahano reaches for his blade, slowly moving towards Goldie, but Goldie manages to leap away, breaking out from his daze. Having seen everything, Anarose explains to Quentin that Kahano at the very last second, before Goldie's blade could reach Kahano's head, had moved his neck several millimeters away, perfectly dodging Goldie's strike. With Anarose and Quentin unable to believe Kahano's mastery of distance, Goldie becomes enraged, refusing to allow such a weakling to embarrass him. Imbuing his sword with a golden dragon spirit, Goldie charges at Kahano, but is suddenly knocked down out of nowhere. Apparently, Kahano had pretended to sneeze right before impact, only to use the opportunity to place his blade in front of Goldie, allowing him to run into the blade and knock himself out. With Quentin refusing to believe Kahano is that strong, Anarose begins to wonder if she would be able to recreate or mimic Kahano's perfect moves, even if she were to train for them. Cutting to Iris, we see her talking to Rose's cocky fiancé, who seemingly has influence over Iris's actions. In Kageno's next match, he easily defeats Quentin, heading back under the stands, only to be confronted by Anarose, who is Kahano's next opponent. Asking Kahano to not hold back, Kahano tests Anarose, revealing that his armor is weighted as to give the people he's fighting a chance, but Anarose stands strong, refusing to be scared. Following Rose, we see her continue to run from men chasing her down, forced to partially harm one of them to buy herself more time to flee. Cutting to Kahano, we see him brainstorming in bed, ways to be entertained in the Bushin festival, but is interrupted by his friend, having barged into Kahano's room to tell Kahano of his brilliant idea. Kahano's friend states that he has come up with several ideas to capture Rose, in order to get rich off her bounty, but Kahano continues to ignore his friend's rambling. Wanting to get some fresh air, Kahano spots his sister visiting him, forcing him to escape with his friend out the window. Walking through town, Kahano praises Rose for committing such a crime, amazed that she had drawn so much attention, whilst also being able to escape successfully. Suddenly Kahano hears someone playing the piano, drawn in and hypnotized by the melodic masterpiece that is Beethoven's Sonata No. 14. In Kahano's past life, he had been forced to learn piano, initially hating the craft as he could have spent the time training his body, but over time, he grew fond of the piano, as it acted as a tool to set the mood before he would engage in battle. Heading to the source of the sound, he continues to admire the beauty of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, wondering whether another reincarnated person could be here. Sadly, he realizes it's only Epsilon, but Kahano is happy to see that she has taken a liking to the piano, just like he had. Chatting with Epsilon, he learns she is attempting to build connections as an artist, just like how the other girls are building businesses and expanding their influences. Asking if Epsilon knows anything about Rose, Kahano learns that Rose is in the underground passages, prompting Kahano to compliment Epsilon's body as a thanks for giving him information on Rose. As Kahano leaves, We cut to Alexia and Natsumi both descending the stairs that lead to the underground tunnels, as Alexia deduces that the tunnels would have been the only escape route Rose had access to. Natsumi agrees, stating that the underground passages are only known by royalty, making the two fear that they may get lost. With no other choice, Alexia ignores all negative thoughts, carrying on into the passageway, forcing Natsumi to follow after Alexia to keep her safe. As Rose pushes her fatigued body through the disgusting tunnels, the pain in her chest is revealed to be a curse. Apparently on the day of the incident, Rose had realized that her fiancé had done something to her father. On top of that, Rose had deduced that all the men in the room were under her fiancé's orders, forcing Rose's hand, as she saw an opportunity to cut her fiancé down and hopefully free her father. Sadly, Rose had failed, and instead was deemed a fugitive for assaulting royalty, explaining her current situation. Sitting down to rest, Rose wonders if she should turn herself in, as this would at least spare her kingdom from her fiancé using her as an excuse to invade neighboring kingdoms, in search of her. Slowly sinking into despair as the pain in her chest continues to eat away at her, Rose wonders if Kahano could save her like he promised, but Rose scolds herself for even considering dragging innocent people like Kahano into her personal affairs. Out of nowhere, Rose begins to hear some music, recognizing the tune as Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Slowly tracking down the source of the sound, Rose is in awe upon spotting Shadow masterfully playing the piano, all whilst captivated by the song's beauty. With a flawless finish, Kahano gets to the point, demanding to know Rose's plans moving forward. Learning Rose will continue to fight for the best possible outcome for her friend and family. Satisfied with Rose's selfless declaration, Kahano leaves, but as a gift Kahano ignites Rose with his purple flame, removing the curse that had been digging away at her chest, and giving Rose the strength to carry on. Suddenly several assassins from the cult of Diablo attack, but having been given a second chance to fight for her future, Rose easily dispatches the several assassins, only to head back through the tunnels. Just then, Rose runs into Alexia and Natsumi, who question Rose on whether she truly had tried to assassinate her fiancé, but not wanting the two to get involved. Rose ignores them trying to leave, but Alexia states that she can't let Rose leave. With both Rose and Alexia igniting their blades, Rose manages to surpass and claim victory, placing Alexia in Natsumi's care, only to leave the two behind. Thinking for a bit, Natsumi accepts this outcome, believing this is what Kahano decided would be best for Rose. Back with Kahano, he has returned to his dorm room, but runs into Claire, who had been waiting for him. Straddling Kahano to prevent his escape, Claire states that Kahano had promised to return home and spend time with her, but he had betrayed her trust. Claire gives Kahano a last chance, slowly strangling him, as she reveals that she is taking part in the Bushin Festival, demanding that Kahano watch and cheer her on for her upcoming matches in a seat she has prepared for Kahano. With his last breath, Kahano has no other option but to agree to his sister's conditions. Back with Alexia, she has returned to the housing space she and Natsumi would normally meet, but finds out that Natsumi has disappeared, leaving only information on Rose's kingdom behind. At the same time, Kahano has entered the VIP section of the school, noting that he is underdressed compared to all the nobles, but reasons that he doesn't want his gifted seat to go to waste. Searching around, he realizes that his seat is next to Iris, questioning if he could be wrong, but Iris confirms that Kahano's seat is indeed next to her, as Iris normally arranges for Claire to sit next to her, but this time Claire has given her seat to Kahano. Having some small talk, Iris apologizes for the incident with Zenon along with her overbearing sister Claire, prompting Kahano to accept her apology. Just then, Iris and her friends begin to discuss possible candidates that catch their eye, but when Kahano is asked for his opinion, Kahano points out the mundane man, who Iris nor her friends are aware of. Additionally, Anarose and Beatrix are brought up, both strong warriors with high chances of winning the festival. Taking a break from the small talk, Kahano walks around the arena, noting a powerful presence behind him, but realizes it's Beatrix. Interrogating Kahano once more, Beatrix wonders if he was purposely ignoring her, but brushes it off. Moving on, she wonders if Kahano had found the elf she was looking for, but Kahano feigns ignorance once more, only for both to exchange food and part ways. Back with Iris, we see her agitated when Rose's fiancé chooses to sit next to her. Rose's fiancé reminds Iris of her and Rose's kingdom's alliance, and that the two should just get along. Seeing as Anarose is fighting the mundane man, Rose's fiancé picks Iris's brain, asking if it'll be a guaranteed win for Anarose. Iris interrupts, adding that the mundane man is a unique specimen as his mysterious confidence is what catches her eyes, intriguing Rose's fiancé. With the duel between Kahano and Anarose beginning, Anarose replays all the bottles she's seen of the mundane man once more through her mind, ultimately deciding to make the first move. Waiting for Anarose, Kahano nonchalantly parries the strike, continuing to dodge a slash to the torso, falling back. Just then, Kahano disappears, taunting Anarose from behind, only to dash behind Anarose once more, kicking her away. Giving Anarose time to breathe and assess what just happened, Kahano waits for Anarose's next attack, realizing that she plans to counterattack instead. Playing along, Kahano goes in for a strike, allowing Anarose to counterattack, but Kahano surpasses her reaction time, having already read her movements, only to defeat Anarose in a split second. Having witnessed everything, Iris is confident that she will be able to best the mundane man, leaving Rose's fiancé. Heading out himself, Rose's fiancé orders his men to investigate the mundane man, wondering if he is part of an underground guild. That evening, Iris finishes her assigned duel, spotting Beatrix, only to run after her. Before we can hear their conversation, we cut to Kahano, who's heading home, happy about what had transpired today, but runs into Claire, who had been waiting for him, realizing that he had forgotten to watch his sister's duel. That night, we see Rose has made up her mind on her next course of actions. Following Iris practicing her swordplay, Iris states that she knows she has been gifted since birth, even being able to defeat the kingdom's commanding knight as a child. Having won the previous year's Bushin Festival, Iris has had high expectations placed on her, deemed the pride of her kingdom. Sadly, ever since the invasion of her school, and meeting Alpha, Iris had begun to realize her powerlessness once her magic is no longer a factor in a duel. Cutting to Kahano enjoying a nice cup of coffee, Kahano greets Iris, who joins Kahano, both indulging in some snacks and coffee. Having been forced to watch his sister's duel, Kahano spots Beatrix attempting to enter the VIP lounge, only to be stopped by several men. Realizing who is here, Iris intervenes, welcoming the elf, only to have her sit next to Iris. As Beatrix asks the other nobles to help find her elf sister, Kahano is brought into the conversation, with Beatrix stating that she senses something mysterious about Kahano, but luckily this only confuses Iris and her friends. Hearing Beatrix's statement, Kahano praises Beatrix, the goddess of war, having been able to sense a fraction of his true potential. Cutting to Rose's fiancé, we see him continue to drug Rose's father, intending to use Rose's father to spark a war with Iris's kingdom. Meeting with Iris's father, they all head into the VIP section, only for Beatrix to pick up a disgusting odor from Rose's father. Attempting to cover it up, Rose's fiancé attempts to get Beatrix kicked out for insulting a noble, but holds back, realizing how powerful Beatrix is. With Beatrix now suspecting him, Rose's fiancé begins to worry, as he must now monitor both the mundane man and Beatrix, believing they both have the potential to mess up his plans. With Claire's match finished, Kahano disguised as the mundane man and Iris prepare for their duel. Now face to face with the disguised Kahano, Iris acknowledges that Kahano is strong, as she can't get a read on Kahano's intentions whatsoever. Deciding to end the battle with a single strike, Iris grips her blade, ready to cut Kahano down, but before she's able to draw her blade, Iris suddenly pictures herself getting decapitated, instantly backing away from Kahano. Having instinctively backed away, Iris attempts to approach Kahano, but this time imagines her foot being severed. Cutting back to the stands, we see Rose sneakily make her way to the VIP section, prepared to face any guards waiting for her. Surprisingly, the Shadow Garden girls have already carved a path for her, allowing Rose to continue on with ease. Hearing the crowd booing Iris for being so cowardly, Iris encases herself in flames, charging at Kahano, but notes that he hasn't even drawn his blade. Swinging her blade down on Kahano, Iris is caught off guard, as Kahano manages to read her movements, parrying her blade with his palms, only to pin Iris to the ground. With that, the duel ends in Kahano's favor, but back in the stands, Iris's father leaves the VIP room, unable to believe that his daughter was so easily defeated. Just then, Rose makes her entrance, standing before her arrogant fiancé. As Rose's fiancé attempts to order Rose's father around, Rose apologizes to her mindless father, who surprisingly is able to muster out some words, forgiving Rose for all of her actions. Panicking that the king had broken out of his brainwashing, Rose's fiancé notices Rose dashing towards him, forced to use the king as a meat shield, but is shocked to see that Rose has stabbed and killed her own father. Now that Rose has set her father free from her fiancé's brainwashing and future schemes, Rose reasons that she too doesn't want to be used, readying herself to take her own life. As several men attempt to capture Rose alive, suddenly the mundane man appears, fending off Rose's attackers, only to reveal himself as Shadow. Realizing that Shadow was the one who saved her when she was younger, Rose states that she no longer has any reason to live, but realizes that the job is not finished. Whilst Rose is evacuating everyone, Kahano interrogates Rose's fiancé, but suddenly Beatrix intervenes, challenging Kahano in place of Rose's fiancé. Seeing an opening, Rose's fiancé manages to escape, but as we pan back to Iris, we see she has finally found her opportunity to meet Shadow. Elsewhere, Iris's father is informed of Rose's fiancé, fleeing the kingdom, having left behind the corpse of Rose's father. Back with Kahano, we see him welcome Beatrix's challenge, confidently and precisely dodging and striking Beatrix. As this happens, Beatrix notes Kahano's unusual tempo, unable to read or follow Kahano's movements, as he is constantly moving into her blind spots. Before the two are able to continue, Iris interrupts, unsheathing her mithril blade covered in artifacts, igniting it, only to swing it towards Kahano. Jumping out of the way, Kahano appears above Iris, but Iris senses his movement, swinging the blade around, only for Kahano to disappear once again. With Kahano taunting Iris, Kahano is forced to turn his attention to Beatrix, now facing against both girls. Elsewhere, Rose has fled the scene, questioning if she should return to the capital or not, but is stopped by Alpha. Continuing the brawl throughout the streets, the three dance among carriages, forcing Kahano to keep his eye on both Beatrix and Iris constantly. Blocking Iris's charged strike, Kahano is sent flying into a building, forced to improvise with crowbars as weapons. Nonetheless, the three continue fighting, ultimately ending up on top of a moving train. In the meantime, Rose listens to Alpha's advice, realizing that Rose can continue along her current path alone or she can choose to join the Shadow Garden. Knowing that she needs to grow stronger to protect her kingdom, Rose accepts Alpha's offer to join Shadow Garden. Back with Kahano, we see him knocking the two girls back, leading the two girls to a body of water, where Kahano makes use of some water magic, using it to maneuver around the girls. Kahano shoots several water projectiles at the girls, but Iris takes the chance to retaliate, conjuring a huge wall of flame to force Kahano away from the body of water, only to appear behind him. Having anticipated this, Kahano kicks Iris back, but straight away is forced to block and fend off Beatrix's advances, all three ultimately ending up on the clock tower. Attempting to appear behind Beatrix once again, Beatrix reveals that she has learned, impressing Kahano as she has grown during this fight. Before they can continue, Iris lunges at Kahano from behind, forcing Kahano to fend off Iris with one hand, whilst the other holds back Beatrix. Desperate, Iris begins plotting with Beatrix, amusing Kahano as he wonders what the girls could be up to. Seeing Iris rush him with such bloodlust, Kahano readies to defend her blade, but just then, Iris releases her blade, choosing to tackle Kahano instead. At the same time, Kahano spots Beatrix charging up a powerful strike, realizing that Iris plans to sacrifice herself for Beatrix to cut Kahano down. Observing Beatrix's movements carefully, Kahano kicks aside Iris, whilst also dodging Beatrix's slash, making use of a small window to grapple and toss Beatrix onto Iris. For good measure, Kahano stomps onto the girls' bodies, deeming the battle over, but as Kahano attempts to leave, the two girls demand that Kahano not run away. Hearing the girls mock him for running, Kahano begins laughing maniacally, flying into the sky, only to encase the town in his purple domain. To outline the vast difference in their powers, Kahano reveals his atomic power, lighting up the sky, only to disappear, revealed to have cleared all of the rain clouds in the sky, leaving only a luscious blue scenery. In the aftermath of everything, we see the Shadow Garden has once again been pinned for all the damages, but luckily Kahano's life has returned to normal. The season ends with the Shadow Garden girls continuing to grow their influence across the world, but as we follow Rose and Alpha, we see them both heading into the mountains, where the secret town of Alexandria, a town once belonging to a mist dragon, is now the base for the Shadow Garden Girls. Deemed the 666th soldier, Rose is stripped of all her belonging and status, and it is here where she'll be reborn. Picking up from the previous season, we follow Delta transformed and running free through a forest, only for us to follow Beta reporting her findings since the Bushin Festival to Kahano and his Shadow Garden Girls. Happy to report that there have been no signs from the cult of Diablo. Beta and the other girls point out that neighboring countries have heard of Rose's father's death. Therefore they should prioritize their efforts on the Oriana Kingdom. Additionally, the topic of the lawless country is brought up, a piece of land that is not governed by any rules, suddenly receiving a huge influx of cash. Knowing that evil runs rampant in the lawless city, the Shadow Girls suggest Kahano check out the lawless city for himself, but Kahano suddenly cuts them off, stating that he can smell blood emanating from the lawless city. As the girls look outside, they find it weird that the moon is suddenly a hint of red, freaking the girls out as they allude to a catastrophic incident that occurred 1,000 years ago. Knowing that if they let the lawless city continue funneling money, the surrounding countries will surely be affected, therefore Alpha begins ordering several girls to prepare, but suddenly Kahano cuts her off. Seeing as this is the perfect opportunity to earn some cash, Kagenos states that he'll personally deal with the lawless city, but the girls are clearly concerned for their master's safety. Using the red moon to personify his powers, Kahano manages to convince the girls to allow him to investigate alone, prompting all the girls to once again show their loyalty to Kahano by kneeling to him. Cutting to Quentin and Goldie, we see the two currently visiting the lawless city, standing before the Crimson Tower, ruled by one of the three rulers of the lawless city, the Blood Queen. Knowing that the Blood Tower is also known as the Castle of Vampires, Quentin and Goldie note how strange it is to see a swarm of lifeless people nearby. Just then, a hooded figure appears from the towers, stating that only servants and guests of the Blood Queen or powerful warriors can enter. Seeing the hooded figure mock them, Quentin and Goldie remind the figure that they are quite powerful, but this only makes the hooded figure chuckle. Unveiling his true form, the hooded figure states that he too had once challenged the Blood Queen, but had lost one of his arms, only to be held as a watchdog for the Queen. As a warning, the figure introduces himself as the White Devil, which Quentin and Goldie recognize as a wanted criminal with a massive bounty on his head. As the White Devil leaps down towards the two, Quentin and Goldie have no choice but to fight, clashing with the White Devil. The next morning, we cut back to Kahano being dragged through the lawless city by his older sister Claire. Seeing as this is a perfect excuse to explore the city, Kahano asks Claire where they'll be heading. Learning that Claire needs to attend a meeting with the Dark Knight Association, a private group only known to certain people. Flashing back, apparently towards the end of the Bushin Festival, it was ultimately Claire that ended up winning the whole tournament. Whilst celebrating with Claire, Kahano found out about Claire traveling to the lawless city, but Kahano ended up being dragged along for her adventures. Claire states that if Kahano continues to follow and listen to her, she'll guarantee her a high-ranking knight position in the Midgar's Knight Order after graduation, but this makes Kahano realize that he never thought of what he would do after high school. Knowing that Claire will end up inheriting their father's land, Kahano states that he'll be fine with any job as long as it gives him freedom, but Claire believes that mindset is not good enough. As the two head past several stores, Claire is suddenly stopped by a store clerk, who begins complimenting Claire's looks. Taken in by the compliments, Claire has a look at what the store clerk is selling, noticing Goldie being sold as a slave. Right before Claire walks away, the store clerk attempts to sell her both Goldie and Quentin as slaves, but all whilst this happens Kahano wonders if he's met the two men before. As the sun sets, Kahano leaves his nearby dorm and Claire for some fresh air, snacking some food, but suddenly is pickpocketed as a man bumps into him. Immediately retrieving his wallet, Kahano pays the man back by taking the man's wallet as well. As Kahano explores the street, he gets pickpocketed countless times, but he simply retrieves his wallet and pickpocketed the perpetrators back. Just then, Kahano spots three men kicking and swearing at a vampire underling, also known as a ghoul, a creature known to have a lot of health points. As Kahano approaches the men, Kahano suddenly senses a powerful surge of magic energy, watching as a red moon suddenly appears. At the same time, the beaten-up ghoul suddenly goes into a frenzy, impaling one of the attackers with its hand. As the ghoul bites another one of the men, The third man flees, but Kahano stays, watching as the bidden man begins to transform into a ghoul himself. Wondering if he should do something about the multiplying ghouls, Kahano reasons that he should let things unfold a bit more, but just then, a red-haired girl arrives, instantly killing the ghouls. Introducing herself as Mary the ancient vampire hunter, Mary warns Kahano to run, alluding to a frenzy that has begun and that they are out of time. As Mary leaps away, Kahano smirks, noting how his curiosity of this mystery is piquing, but at the same time, Claire discovers Kahano has fled from his room. Suddenly, a ghoul appears from the adjacent room, prompting Claire to instantly decapitate it, before leaving to search for Kahano. At the same time, Kahano's friends, Poe and Skell, are also seen gawking at the lovely women offering to service them at night, but out of nowhere, the two are smacked onto the ground, turning to see countless ghouls attacking. Cutting to one of the girls, Marie, we see her depressed, having to use her body to make a living. But as she checks to see what the noise is outside, Marie is horrified to see ghouls swarming the streets. To make things worse, one of the customers appears, having been turned into a ghoul, but before the ghoul can attack, Kahano appears, having transformed into Shadow. Having slain the ghoul, Kahano introduces himself, warning Marie to flee as the frenzy has begun. As Kahano leaves, one of Marie's friends checks up on her, shocked to learn that Shadow saved her. Inspired, Marie begins packing her things, having realized that she wants a better life. Elsewhere, a fox lady by the name of Yukime begins to make her move. Cutting to Claire, we see her crying, as she hugs the corpse of what she believes is Kahano. Hearing Claire cry, Mary appears, informing Claire that Kahano is alive, believing that someone that matches Kahano's description had been taken to the Crimson Tower, where he'll be sacrificed to awaken the 1,000-year slumbering Blood Queen, Elizabeth. Mary states that the Blood Queen intends to use the Blood Moon to help reawaken, but Claire could care less, as her one goal is to rescue Kahano. With both Claire and Mary heading in the same direction, they both begin carving through ghouls, all whilst Goldie, Quentin, Pole and Skell run for their lives. Following Juggernaut, we see him admiring the beauty of the chaos unfolding in the streets, mentioning how it reminds him of the Therianthrope invasion. As an army of knights begin to flee, they are suddenly attacked by ghouls, but Kahano arrives helping fend off the ghouls. Panning towards the Crimson Towers, we see Lord Crimson learn that his plan is running smoothly, but gets annoyed that Yukime the Spirit Fox, ruler of the White Tower, and Juggernaut the Tyrant, ruler of the Black Tower, is stalling his plans. Knowing that once the Blood Queen resurrects, they'll stand no chance, but Lord Crimson gets curious when he learns that a third mysterious shadow is slaying his ghouls. Out on the streets, we see Yukime and Juggernaut are having their own duel, but suddenly Kahano appears, introducing himself as Shadow. Flashing back, we learn that the White Devil always loved fighting, being a skill that he could be proud of doing. Sadly, the day the White Devil challenged Lord Crimson, was the day he finally tasted defeat, ultimately chained to the Crimson Towers, tortured as he was held back from slaughtering and slaying the people, the one thing that he loved to do. The night the ghouls began infecting the lawless town, the White Devil spotted the Juggernaut gleefully slaughtering the crowd, whilst Yukime brandished off her elegant skills. Knowing that he doesn't stand a chance against neither pillars of the lawless city, the White Devil spots Kahano join the battle as Shadow, immediately catching the attention of Juggernaut and Yukime, as both Yukime and Juggernaut cease their own duel to pay their respects to Kahano. Seeing as there isn't much time, Juggernaut turns his axe onto the gate of the Crimson Tower, easily breaking a hole into the tower walls. Seeing as she has things to attend to herself, Yukime thanks Kahano for helping out some of her girls earlier, wishing to stay on good terms, only to leave. Having watched everything just transpire, the White Devil knows never to mess with the Juggernaut or Yukime, but turning to Kahano, the White Devil notes how he can't sense any power from him, choosing to take out his frustrations on Kahano. As the White Devil leaps down from his watchpost, he calls out for Kahano to face him, but before the White Devil can reach Kahano, his body is cut to pieces by Kahano, left there to bleed out and wonder what just happened. Cutting to Beta, we see her sifting to the books of a library within the Crimson Towers, confirming that the cult of Diablo's powers solely stem from the Great Demon's power, but Beta wonders how the cult discovered ways to extract the Great Demon's powers. Just then, Claire and Mary appear, having accidentally stumbled down a passage that had led them to the same library Beta is in. Spotting Beta from afar, Claire readies her blade for a duel, but Beta reassures Claire and Mary that she had no intentions of fighting, revealing that she knows about Claire's capabilities. Noting that Beta isn't a ghoul, Mary tells Claire that they shouldn't waste time, noting how there are various other shadow girls scattered around the library as well, one of them being Rose. Officially introducing herself, Beta reassures Claire and Mary that her reason for being here is to study the blood of a progenitor vampire, which happens to be the Blood Queen. Upon hearing Beta's intentions, Mary gets suspicious, but is forced to back off when Beta reveals that they have intel on Mary as well. As a compromise, both parties agree to not intervene with each other's missions, but before Claire and Mary leave, Mary mentions how they need to save Kahano. Hearing this, both Beta and Rose get intrigued, but when Rose almost reveals her identity, Beta silences Rose, allowing Claire and Mary to leave, but not before alluding to a haven that annoys Mary. Now alone, Beta reminds Rose that their mission is to solely extract blood from the Queen, and that Rose is to not intervene or act out in any other way. With Claire and Mary running into a vampire, Mary instructs Claire to puncture the vampire's heart, learning that all vampires will die if their heart is crushed, or if they're exposed to sun. As Claire and Mary ascend some stairs, Claire begins interrogating Mary, wondering what she must be hiding as she seems to have quite a lot of knowledge on vampires. Refusing to answer any questions, Mary states that she solely wants to vanquish the vampire queen, but out of nowhere, they both sense a powerful aura nearby. Hiding behind a pillar, Claire and Mary watch as the Juggernaut carve through the high-ranking vampires, noting how they should avoid fighting that monster at all cost. Sadly, the Juggernaut had already sensed their presence, dashing in close, only to punch Claire right in the face. When Mary attempts to check to see if Claire is alive, she accidentally leaves herself wide open, receiving a fatal slash from the Juggernaut's axe. Sad to see the fight's over, the Juggernaut attempts to leave, but is pleasantly surprised to see that Claire is still alive. Turning to heal Mary's fatal wound, Claire's is shocked when Mary pulls her in close, choosing to kiss and lick some of Claire's blood, which instantly revitalizes Mary. Unleashing a torrent of blood projectiles, Mary watches as Juggernaut ignites his weapon, smashing his weapon into the ground to create a smokescreen. As both girls try to figure out where the Juggernaut went, Claire turns to see the Juggernaut has snuck up from behind her, but before the Juggernaut can take out Claire, Kahano appears, deflecting the Juggernaut's blade, knocking the Juggernaut out of the tower, only to disappear once more. Now alone, Mary reveals that her true identity is a vampire, which Claire had suspected. Recounting the history of vampires, Mary states that 1,000 years ago, her kind used to rule over humans, but as humans discovered the vampire's weakness, they easily fought back against the vampires. As for the Blood Queen Elizabeth, she held no bad will towards the humans, even convincing the vampires that followed her to give up blood for good. As a result, the existing vampires were able to live normal lives in the sun in a sanctuary they referred to as a haven, even losing the thirst for blood. But sadly, only Elizabeth was never able to remove her thirst for blood and weakness to the sun. Unknowingly, when the red moon that appeared every 1,000 years appeared, Elizabeth's thirst for blood overwhelmed her, and when Lord Crimson gave Elizabeth a single drop of blood, Elizabeth could no longer hold herself back. Elizabeth went on to slaughter hundreds of people, even her own kind within the haven she had set up, but when Mary went to confront Elizabeth, Elizabeth had chosen to puncture her own heart, sealing herself in a coffin. After Elizabeth's slaughter, Lord Crimson had intervened, stealing Elizabeth's corpse for himself, and intended to use her during the current red moon. Hearing Mary's tragic past, Claire can't help but feel sympathy for Mary, agreeing to help slay Lord Crimson to save Elizabeth. With Mary agreeing to rescue Claire's kidnapped brother, and Claire agreeing to save Mary's queen, we cut to Kahano, who has infiltrated the treasury of the Crimson Towers, happily looting the place, but notes that even 100 million Zeri is not enough, if he plans to live at least 300 years. Knowing that his mission is basically complete, Kahano heads to deal with the boss of the towers first, hoping to make a grand entrance. Cutting to Lord Crimson, we see him admiring Elizabeth's crimson heart, choosing to use the corpse of Kahano's look-alike as a proxy body for the Queen. Before Lord Crimson can complete his ritual, Kahano appears, activating his atomic powers, blowing up Kahano's look-alike body and stopping Lord Crimson's ritual. Check out one of our other videos on the screen or in the info card above. Subscribe, like and comment.